Oh man, that is fantastic. The skin's a little thick, but oh, this is a sweet peach. This is really a nice flavor. Guten gardening, everybody. Well, right beside me is our third year peach tree. It's a really awesome tree. It doesn't spread out that far. I would say it's probably about a 4-foot wide tree. And right now it's about 14, maybe 15 feet tall, which is about as tall as this tree is going to get. It's a third year tree. And as you might expect, in our first year when we planted it, we got nothing. During our second year, there were 3 peaches that formed on this tree. And we thought we'd get our first peach harvest ever. But they were there one day and then they were completely gone the next, and our assumption is that some squirrels came along and they took care of those peaches for us. Now this year there are quite a few peaches on this tree. Many of them are just now getting to that stage where they need to be picked, and we're going to talk in this video about some of the signs that we know that our peaches are ready to be harvested. Now this is our first year of harvesting peaches, but we've looked into what the experts say, and so we're trying to follow their advice, and we're going to give you some of those signs today based on what we've learned. Now there are also some peaches on here that aren't quite ripe yet, and we're going to be harvesting those hopefully over the next week or so if the animals let us. And there are some peaches that are really small still. Now we've looked into why that might be, and we're going to give a suggestion for that as well in case that's something that you're dealing with. Again, all of this is going to be based on our research. But let's go ahead and harvest our first peach from this tree. Now there are some peaches that are at my level that I can reach, that I could pick, but I also just got this fruit picker from Farm and Fleet, and you know what, for the size, and this thing has a lot of handle, but for the size of it, it was about $20. It'll be a nice handy tool for us in the future, because this is going to allow me to get up to even those really high spots without a ladder. All right, this peach is going to be our first one. There it is, our first peach harvested off of this peach tree. One of the things that was recommended we look for in terms of knowing if a peach is ripe or ready to be harvested is a nice peachy smell, and that's apparently the case for many of the varieties. There is a really beautiful, delicious smell here coming off of this peach. Now a second indicator of ripeness is that there is no more green left on your peach, and that's exactly what I can say here. This variety seems to turn pretty nice and red in many spots, and then it's yellowish orange the rest of the way around. So there's no green left on this. Now if this is something we want to eat right off the tree and not have it sit around a couple of days to finish ripening, then we'd also be looking for some softness around the shoulder, right by the stem there. But in this case, I've picked it because I've started to see something else that's an indicator that the peaches are pretty much ready, and that is some animal damage. They've been coming out here and chewing on the peaches as they ripen up, and I don't really want to lose a whole bunch of peaches to our critters around here, especially our squirrels, etc. And so I'm going to harvest it before it gets any softer, and I'll just take it inside. And what we've been doing, because we've got a lot of fruit in the past from Tree Ripe Fruit Company, they recommend that you set it on a flat surface face down, like on your table, for example, and let it ripen for 2 or 3 days, and then it'll soften up. And so we actually have some peaches inside right now doing exactly that. It works perfectly. So we're going to harvest these, even though they could be a little bit softer. Now, whether or not you think this is a massive peach, I'll tell you that it's a good size because it's our first set of peaches here. And also, the Tree Ripe Fruit Company, where we got some of our peaches from, said that this was a pretty difficult year for peaches, and a lot of places struggled. So let us know if that's been your experience if you grow peaches. So I'm very satisfied to see something like this. So I'm going to go ahead and harvest the rest of the peaches that are full size, that are ripe, and I'll show you how many we get in the end after I've harvested them. But one of the things that you'll notice here are all of these smaller peaches on here. So there's a couple of things that I want to point out. One, we didn't get a ton of rain, especially early on in the season. And so I think that that may have had some impact just on the overall productivity. But beyond that, and maybe a bigger factor here, is that we didn't come through and pull off any of the peaches. As this was our first year really getting any kind of production, it's our year to see exactly what's going to happen if we just let things ride, let everything grow as it is on its own without any interference from us. But in my reading, what I've seen is that some of these peach trees produce 80 to 90%. That was the statistic I read. 80 to 90% more peaches than they can actually sustain. And so that's why a lot of people recommend going through and thinning out the peaches, much like you thin out a lot of your other stone fruits when you're growing them, so that the tree focuses its energy on producing fewer but higher quality, better, fully mature fruit, rather than a bunch of smaller fruit. And the plant will shed some of those fruit on its own. It will drop off some of those fruit that it can't handle, but it doesn't always get rid of as many as are needed. So yes, during the growing season, we saw small peaches falling off, etc., but we didn't actually go in and make sure enough had come off. So that's something that we're going to have to take into consideration for the coming years, because we don't necessarily want to see all of these smaller peaches that aren't going to ever develop. We want to make sure we have more and maybe even bigger peaches than that. So that's something else that we have to keep in mind. So for those of you who grow your own peaches or are considering growing your own peaches, what have you heard as far as a recommendation for thinning? How many do you clear off in order to get the best overall crop, best overall yield from your peach tree? I've actually waited a couple of days since I started filming this just so I could have a ripe peach from this tree to trial out. So one of the peaches that I just picked on here is ripe. I'm gonna go ahead and cut it open, show you what the inside looks like, and we'll get our first taste test from this tree as well. All right, a little bit of a dark spot there, but that never hurt anybody. Let's give it a try. That is so sweet. Oh man, that is fantastic. The skin's a little thick, but oh, this is a sweet peach. This is really, really a nice flavor. These are gonna be great. You know, one of the things we often do with our peaches to preserve them is to blanch them for about a minute. We learned this from a recipe online. I'll actually put the recipe that we found for freezing peaches, the link to that video, in our description. Give credit where credit's due. But basically we blanch the peach and pull the skin off, slice it into small pieces, and then make a kind of syrup for it, and then freeze it. So we're gonna do that with anything else that we have here that's extra. And we're gonna get to enjoy these over the winter. Well, there's our harvest. You know, they're not Georgia peaches. They're not all massive. They're not perfectly shaped, but we know that they are delicious once they ripen up. And for this being the third year that we're growing this peach tree, and the fact that we've finally got a decent harvest out of this, I'm just super excited. I'm really excited for what next year holds for this tree as it continues to grow and mature. I think there are some things that we're gonna try differently next year. I think we're gonna have to do our best to thin out the peaches, because again, I think that's one of the reasons why we got so many smaller peaches this year. So we'll help the tree out. We'll thin out some of these peaches. And remember, this has been a pretty dry summer for us. And then as I mentioned earlier in the video, a lot of folks have struggled, I think, this year with peaches. If you're growing peaches, let us know if that's been the case for you. But maybe some of the weather changes next season. Who knows? We get a little bit more rain here and there. We might do even better with these peaches. But for a first time getting a decent, well, any peach harvest, because again, last year, the squirrels stole our peaches, even with a little bit of damage here and there, a little bit of insect damage, a little bit of, there's some critter damage right there on this peach that's too small anyway. Even with that, I am happy to say that we've got a nice little peach harvest here. And these are zone 5 peaches. So don't think that you're limited by your zone necessarily. I mean, we're growing peaches in zone 5. That's a far cry from Georgia, wouldn't you say? So this is something that maybe you can be encouraged to do. It'll take a couple years, just like a lot of the fruit trees out there. Take a couple years to get going, but once you do, you'll start to see the fruit of your endeavors. Well, folks, we hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, don't forget to give us a like, leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.